Yields back. Ms. Lofgren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am pleased to have been involved with the introduction of this bill with you, Mr. Chairman, and working with our Senate counterpart, Mr. Wyden. And I'm encouraged by the bipartisan support that has been expressed for this measure today. I think it is essential that we move this bill. It is essential, but also insufficient. Many people, I think, in their zeal to see the immigration laws enforced, don't realize that the Department of Homeland Security, and specifically ICE, is one of the biggest privacy offenders in the government. ICE has scanned the driver's license photos of 1/3 of Americans. ICE has access to driver's license data of 3/4 of adults in the United States. ICE tracks the movements of drivers in cities that are home to 3 in 4 American adults, and ICE could locate 3 in 4 adults through their utility records. It's a massive privacy violation. I'd like to submit for the record several articles. One, a ACLU article, new records detail DHS purchase and use of vast quantities of cell phone location data, as well as an article from The Intercept. ICE searched LexisNexis database for over 1 million times in just 7 months. And finally, from the Center on Privacy and Technology, and a publication called American Dragnet.
Without objection.
I would like to ask you, Mr. Goodlatte, on whether you think, and by the way, thank you for being here, it's good to see you, whether you think the Fourth Amendment is not for sale measure as drafted would basically address this sort of dragnet around the Fourth Amendment issue that we've been discussing here. Does it get the job done?
I think it would go a long way to addressing some of the concerns that have been expressed, and it would cover all kinds of different types of actions. We've had discussion here about Planned Parenthood clinics, people visiting those, but you also would have a similar concern about people visiting gun stores. So this is a situation where the principle of protecting people's rights under the Fourth Amendment has to come first. And we certainly support the right of state and federal law enforcement to enforce their laws, but they have to do it following the rules. I think this would help, but there are other issues. Geofencing location, for example, is not addressed by this bill. There was a recent court opinion that struck down a geofence warrant, and that may be a good sign, but I think that's something also that the committee should look into very closely. And then you have issues that don't really address the jurisdiction of this committee, but the sale of this information to foreign governments, for example, is not covered in the legislation, and there should be separate legislation addressing that.
Well, maybe that's something we can talk about along with our Senate counterparts. I think this is important to move forward on. However, the fact that our data is being collected is an underlying problem, and we need to do something about that in addition to moving this action. Congresswoman Eshoo and I introduced the most comprehensive federal privacy legislation in Congress called the Online Privacy Act. It would set forth the most thorough and aggressive set of privacy rights among the major proposals in Congress. Now, I wouldn't ask any of the witnesses to take sides among the various measures that are being introduced, but one of the measures that I think is pending in our sister committee, Energy and Commerce, would allow data brokers to continue to collect Americans' data as long as the data broker is acting on behalf of the federal, state, or local government. So that would include, I think, purchase of this material. Would you agree with that, Ms. Gotine or Professor Lambden?
I think it's very important to ensure that the federal government or state or local governments cannot buy their way around the protections in existing statutory law and the Fourth Amendment. So I think any sort of comprehensive privacy legislation would need to tackle that. But I will also say that while I very much support comprehensive data privacy legislation, and I think that is an effort that Congress should throw itself into, I also think that Congress should move ahead very quickly with the Fourth Amendment is Not for Sale Act because there's no reason to delay that. I think what Congress needs to do is to close the gaps that have opened up in existing laws that are allowing the government to evade those laws while then simultaneously taking on the larger project of expanding the universe of privacy protections.
My time has expired. I very much agree with you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.